All right, welcome back, everyone. We are right on time. Thank you so much for being prompt in your return. We have a wonderful panel, and as we get to the end of our day, it is time for us to take up this topic of taking action to address violent extremism and mass atrocities. Particularly, what is the role of parliamentarians in stopping these scourges in our world? And we have an excellent panel to discuss these topics, and I'm very excited about it. I will go through our panelists one by one. We will ask them each to speak for 10 minutes, and as with the other chairs, I will be very strict in enforcing the 10-minute rule, although I do have some fear as I sit here next to His Excellency the Archbishop that I will not be able to scold him if he goes over 10 minutes, but we'll see if I can muster the courage to do that. All right, thank you all again for being here, and I want to say also I have a few very good friends on this panel, and I'm so glad to be sharing the stage with them as well. The first one is Mr. Ivan Simonovic. He is Assistant Secretary General of the United Nations, Special Advisor to the UN Secretary General on the responsibility to protect, the former Minister of Justice from Croatia, and a very good man who has taken up the mantle of promoting responsibility to protect within the infrastructure of the United Nations. Not an easy task, but he is certainly up to the challenge. Mr. Simonovic, please.
So, distinguished chair, Your Excellence, dear panelists, honorable parliamentarians, it is a great opportunity to address you, and I do congratulate organizers for choosing this topic. It cannot be more important and it cannot be more timely. Ladies and gentlemen, we need to face facts. Atrocity crimes, meaning genocide, crimes against humanity, and war crimes are on the rise. I was nostalgic listening yesterday to Ambassador Raab speaking about achievements that humanity has gained in developing a body of international justice and international criminal law. Yes. Since early 90s, after the end of Cold War, we had a wonderful period of the spreading of human rights, with the spreading of democracy, and with decrease of atrocity crimes. This is not true anymore. In recent years, we have increase in atrocity crimes. Last couple of years, we had over 100,000 killed in conflicts. We have increase in conflicts. We have increase in number of civilians killed in conflict. And what's the worst? We have increase in the ratio of civilians that are killed in the conflict. So what does it mean? It means only two things. Either that those are indiscriminate attacks, or that civilians are being systematically, deliberately targeted. Each of that constitute a war crime, and if widespread or systematic, crimes against humanity, and can even reach, as was the case in Yazidis, threshold of genocide. In 2005, in heydays of global optimism, the World Conference adopted an outcome document which in its articles 138 and 139 established what we call now a responsibility to protect. In a nutshell, it says that each and every state is obliged to protect population on its territory from atrocity crimes, namely genocide, ethnic cleansing, and war crimes. If member states would like to protect population, but is unable to do it by itself, it's obligation of other states to help and to support that state to be able to protect population on its territory. But if state manifestly fails or deliberately targets its population, it is a duty of states to take a collective action, through the Security Council to prevent atrocity crimes. Now, we had adopted wonderful principle in 2005. Since then, it has been invoked in a number of Security Council resolutions, over 50 of them, a number of Human Rights Council resolutions, over 20, and at the surface it seems wonderful. But, ladies and gentlemen, a reality check. We have an increase in atrocity crimes. Responsibility to protect is being given a lip service. There are verbal commitments of member states, but there is no delivery. There is no implementation. This is, ladies and gentlemen, where I see your role, the role of parliamentarians. Member states have obligations under international humanitarian law, under international criminal law, under international refugee law. And in addition to that, they have adopted political obligations when consensually adopting 2005 document which codified responsibility to protect. Because of importance of accountability, last Secretary General's yearly report was entitled Responsibility to Protect, Accountability for Prevention. And in that report, a prominent role was given to parliamentarians. And I am happy to tell you that after this meeting, a guideline that my office has drafted for implementation of recommendation, very concrete recommendations of Secretary General's report, will be circulated to you. I just would like to draw your attention to most important powers that I firmly believe that you as parliamentarians have and should be using. First of that is legislative power. You have power of a ratification of international documents, of international treaties, of international conventions. It is shame to say, but next year we will be celebrating 70th anniversary of Genocide Convention, and we have only 149 countries that have adopted Genocide Convention. And I do believe that we should all undertake a global action that we mark 70th anniversary by all countries ratifying Genocide Convention. There are 9 core human rights treaties that need to be ratified because they directly contribute to prevention of atrocity crimes. There are some other relevant documents such as Armed Trade Treaty and some others. Besides that, there is a lot to do within your national law. It's the issue of explicitly criminalizing genocide, crimes against humanity, and war crimes, articulating them into your national criminal laws. Also, it is of immense importance to include in your criminal law provisions that are criminalizing incitement to atrocity crimes, starting from hate speech on. So I do see a really great role as legislators that you have, from addressing root causes through protecting human rights, through protecting free press, from protecting civil society actors who can be important source of early warning signs of atrocity risks, to your activity in preventing triggering of atrocity crimes, such as, for example, hate speech. Then, ladies and gentlemen, you have budgetary powers. You are the one who are discussing whether government is allocating resources properly, including their use to strengthen resilience of societies from atrocity crimes nationally and internationally. Many such activities have been mentioned during our debates. We were discussing education. Military has to be given proper training. They have to establish proper chain of command. There must be money for de-radicalization and other activities that help to prevent atrocity crimes. There is also your important oversight function. You have an oversight over the government, and you, through that oversight, can make government accountable. You can create such opportunities. You can create, as some member states have done, parliamentary committees or subcommittees dealing with atrocity crimes. You can use yearly debates about ombudspersons or national human rights institutions' reports to address atrocity crimes. And I can tell you that just today I got information, the same report of Secretary General will be reflected in guidance for ombudsperson, and it will be circulated to all ombudspersons. So let's attack atrocity crimes from two sides. Let's make government accountable from two sides, from national human rights institutions, ombudspersons who will include reference to atrocity crimes risks and the list of measures and necessary action plans that are needed, and from parliamentarian side, picking that up. I have 1 minute more, and therefore I would like to say that what is also important is horizontal exchange of good experiences, what you are doing right now. I was so glad to hear about exchange of experiences between European Union parliamentarians and Ukrainian parliamentarians yesterday. In all those activities, you will have full support of myself and my office. And let me close, being here in Milan, on the territory of former ancient Roman Empire, and addressing parliamentarians for global action, and being activist myself. It's an old Roman saying, res non verba, meaning action, not words. Thank you.
Thank you, Ivan. That was great, with lots of great advice, wonderful ideas for parliamentarians. We are honored to have our next speaker, His Excellency, the Archbishop of the Metropolitan City of Milan, Monsignor Mario Delpini. Monsignor.
Thank you very much. I'm pleased to be here to speak to you. Unfortunately, better I speak Italian, and hope I'm going to be understood. And my words are from a bishop by me, and for this I will speak about the religious liberty. Io sono vescovo della diocesi di Milano, realtà che comprende tutta la città di Milano e gran parte della sua periferia, fino a raggiungere una popolazione di circa 5 milioni di battezzati. Il mio ruolo e la mia identità spiegano i motivi della mia partecipazione a questo panel. Sono onorato di poter prendere la parola di fronte a una platea così illustre per ricordare ad ognuno di noi partecipanti che il vero contrasto alla violenza e ai crimini di massa non può non comprendere l'affermazione e la difesa della libertà religiosa. Dico questo basandomi sulla storia della città che vi ospita. Milano può essere considerata la capitale del principio della libertà religiosa. Le vicende e lo sviluppo di questa città spiegano bene le fatiche, ma anche i successi legati all'affermazione della libertà religiosa come fondamento del legame e delle forme dell'organizzazione del vivere insieme. Se Milano si è sempre compresa come terra di mezzo, luogo di scambio non solo commerciale ma anche culturale, se Milano ha sviluppato la sua tipica determinazione ambrosiana, che è diventata l'anima e lo stile di questa terra, riconoscibile a livello planetario, tutto questo è stato reso possibile proprio dalla affermazione e maturazione di un'idea di religione e di libertà ad essa connessa, che hanno saputo strutturare istituzioni politiche e sociali che fossero inclusive, capaci di accogliere, di integrare. Va riconosciuto che affermare oggi il principio della libertà religiosa non è questione semplice. Nel 2013 abbiamo celebrato il 17° centenario dell'Editto di Milano, il riconoscimento cioè da parte dell'imperatore Costantino della libertà religiosa ai suoi sudditi, riconoscimento, editto, firmato proprio qui a Milano nel 313 d.C. Il mio predecessore, il cardinale Angelo Scola, affermava che il tema della libertà religiosa, sulla cui bontà sembrerebbe facile a prima vista trovare vasto consenso, possiede in realtà un contenuto tutt'altro che ovvio e si impiglia in un nodo in cui si intrecciano gravi problemi. Radicare in un territorio determinato il principio della libertà religiosa significa infatti avviare processi di maturazione culturale, sociale e politica che toccano questioni cruciali per il vivere insieme, molte delle quali state discutendo in questi giorni. Il rapporto tra pratica religiosa personale e la sua espressione comunitaria, il potere dell'autorità pubblica legittimamente costituita di distinguere le religioni, la coordinazione tra comunità religiose e potere statale, l'equilibrio tra libertà religiosa e pace sociale, il rapporto intricato tra religioni e potere, religione e violenza. Esprimo la convinzione che la religione è una dimensione originaria e determinante non solo per la persona, ma anche per il legame sociale. Sono infatti persuaso che una società che contrasti o ignori la dimensione religiosa sia destinata alla dissoluzione. Affermare il principio della libertà religiosa diventa il modo di esprimere dentro le istituzioni e gli stati un'idea di persona compresa a partire dal principio della relazione e della alterità, dell'incontro e del dialogo, del riconoscimento e dell'alleanza. Una religione non educata rischia di degenerare in forma di violenza e di dare origine al fondamentalismo. Ma allo stesso tempo, senza religioni non c'è un'idea compiuta e profonda di cosa sia la pace. Come ci ricorda Papa Francesco, la pace non si riduce ad un'assenza di guerra, frutto dell'equilibrio sempre precario delle forze. Essa, la pace, si costruisce giorno per giorno nel perseguimento di un ordine voluto da Dio che comporta una giustizia più perfetta tra gli uomini. In Evangelii Gaudium al numero 219. Affermare la libertà religiosa significa lavorare per la pace, creando relazioni e legami che spingono soggetti che potrebbero avere la tentazione di combattersi a costruire logiche di riconoscimento e di alleanza. E ancora Papa Francesco che ce lo ricorda. L'annuncio di pace non è quello di una pace negoziata, ma la convinzione che l'unità dello spirito armonizza tutte le diversità, supera qualsiasi conflitto in una nuova, promettente sintesi. La diversità è bella quando accetta di entrare costantemente in un processo di riconciliazione, fino a sigillare una specie di patto culturale che faccia emergere una diversità riconciliata. Auguro ad ognuno di voi, auguro ai popoli e agli stati che rappresentate di fare sempre più esperienza di questo dono della diversità riconciliata, frutto della libertà religiosa affermata e praticata. Personalmente io faccio di questo invito di Papa Francesco uno dei pilastri del mio ministero pastorale, in un momento in cui Milano, la città dell'editto e della libertà religiosa, è entrata in un nuovo capitolo della sua storia. Milano, infatti, è diventata una società plurale, è chiamata a declinare in nuove forme questo principio della libertà, riconoscendo, accogliendo, stimolando a crescere insieme le religioni che la abitano in modo ormai evidente. Come affermavo nel giorno del mio ingresso, il 24 settembre ultimo scorso, abbiamo bisogno di imparare a riconoscerci sempre di più fratelli e sorelle, proprio a partire dalle nostre diversità. Solo in questo modo la pace di Dio può abitare nei nostri cuori, nelle nostre città, nei nostri stati, nell'intero creato. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Monsignor, for that ringing endorsement of diversity and reconciliation and religious freedom. Next up, we have my friend Dr. Kate Ferguson, the Director of Research and Policy at Protection Approaches, Research Associate at the Partnership for Conflict, Crime, and Security, University of East Anglia. Dr. Ferguson.
Thank you so much. Thank you to everyone here, esteemed, honourable, distinguished guests. Thank you very much for the organisers for inviting me here and giving me the opportunity to talk to you. I'm just going to say some words that will draw a little bit about what Protection Approaches does, the policy analysis that we undertake, and then my own research into what really works in preventing all forms of identity-based violence. What I want to do really is just offer some particular thoughts, one on really to try and emphasize the opportunity to address preventing violent extremism and preventing mass atrocities as a kind of shared agenda. Too often I think they're thought of distinct. I really congratulate the organizers for bringing the opportunity to address them in a shared and holistic manner. I want to call also for kind of cross-pollination, really, of experience from both of those sectors that have emerged. And then finally, I'd like to think a little bit about what governments, parliamentarians, parliamentary structures can do really to move the agenda forward. To me, identity is central in both of these challenges. I think that if you look at the root causes and manifestations of both violent extremism and mass atrocity crimes, what you get to is how perpetrators conceive an aspect or dimension of their victim or victim group's identity. And I think once you start from that position, actually where you are is in a position to interrupt and to inhibit and to disrupt those processes that then lead to different manifestations and different violent expressions of what I think are often the same causes and processes. And that's why Protection Approaches works to combat all forms of identity-based violence, whether that is hate crime at home in the UK or violent manifestations abroad. Moreover, what works in both preventing mass atrocities and violent extremism is upstream, holistic, consistent responses that champion social cohesion, that promote equality, that understand and engage with the difficult dimensions of belonging in a society, the relationship with governance and representation. And that's really why I think that these two agendas must be addressed, at least in part, as the same one. Now, actually, there's a pragmatic reason for that too. We have great political will, I think, in the world to counter and prevent violent extremism. We do not necessarily have the same conviction to prevent mass atrocities. And the reason, I think, is that countering violent extremism or preventing violent extremism is considered a security interest. It is a matter of national interest across the world. We've heard throughout today, and we always hear, that extremism knows no borders. Mass atrocities, on the other hand, are considered to be a collective responsibility and the moral right thing to do. I disagree. I think it is in the national interest of all countries to prevent mass atrocities. Now, my own ethical framework and whether I think it is the right thing to do is different. Many of you may have seen a concept note, a policy note put out by the Stanley Foundation following their peace conference, which gave some figures I'd just like to share with you. In that note, it says that it costs the global economy $14 trillion a year to contain violence. And yet, OECD overseas development assistance, which is considerable, only 1% of that goes towards mitigating conflict and peace building. A further 8% goes to governance agendas, human rights. That's still not very much. And so that upstream prevention strategy has not been given a chance. And yet, you've got this great body of collective organizations, global national will to tackle the challenge of violent extremism. And yet, really, and I am an academic, so I really appreciate the importance of language, both those forms of violence and crimes are forms of the same global preventable phenomenon, and they don't know borders. So that's my call, really. And there is expertise that we have in the atrocity prevention sector that is relevant to combating violent extremism. And there are mechanisms that the violent extremism sector has, which we can use in moving forward the atrocity prevention agenda. I think that we know that a military strategy alone to combating violent extremism doesn't work. And yet there isn't an atrocity prevention lens applied to what is happening in the military strategy against ISIS. There isn't. There should be. ISIS is committing violent extremism and mass atrocities, and those lines blur. In our domestic and national strategies to prevent recruitment, we use not the knowledge from peace building, from what manifests in communities when they are targeted by propaganda. We are deploying counter-narrative strategies that are not rooted in evidence, and yet there are decades and decades of experience from the peace building and mass atrocity prevention world which teach us how we engage with violent words and how that might transform into violent deeds. So those are just examples, but I think promoting that cross-pollination in civil society and in policy is both pragmatic and really useful. So now what can be done? I think that people often talk about an atrocity prevention lens in the atrocity prevention sector. If you can think about a framework that is able to measure those indicators of risk for identity-based violence, whether that happens in our own countries or on the other side of the world, in all of our policies, that lens is really just a way of looking at every single decision that a government or a parliament makes that places protecting the lives of civilians and vulnerable populations in that decision-making process. It just means augmenting existing processes. It doesn't mean creating new I don't know, infrastructures that no states have the funding for. It's just a way of thinking and applying. I think that if you have an office or a framework that is able to then trigger when that early warning comes in to the rest of the people in government, you can then, am I being told? Oh, I thought I was going to be given my 2-minute warning. So far, so good. So if you have a office or a member of parliament within your party who is able to take that early warning, whether that is coming from your own communities or from an organization working in your region or on the other side of the world, it can then trigger a process of communicating to other people in parliament, other people in government, and saying, are you thinking about these people at risk? And this doesn't just apply to departments that engage in social cohesion or that promote international development or that carry out foreign policy. It affects our trade. We've already heard about how arms trade are impacted by these things, our environmental policy, and so on. Just as an example, the UK Department for International Development does not apply such a lens or such a strategy to its deploying of aid right now in support of the Rohingya. So there are so many little ways in which that actually, if just that development of and deployment of aid was able to consider those indicators, we would just, at the very least, have more information. Finally, just a few things that I think that parliaments and parliamentarians can do to pursue this agenda of prevention. First, preventing violence stands above politics. It's about working together and communicating in a way that places the agenda of protecting lives above party politics. We can all disagree about all sorts of other things, and I'm sure all of us come from very different political positions, but when you can agree on that baseline, then you can really move the agenda forward. To do that in a meaningful way, it means working collectively, sharing information, building constituencies of influence, using existing mechanisms to apply scrutiny and doing so collectively. So when you're applying scrutiny to government, you're not necessarily doing it just from the position of being in opposition. Seeking amendments and clarifications that can just expose and check that the government is in its legislation, accommodating that protection and prevention component. Institutionalizing your commitment so that after your tenure and period in Parliament comes to an end, your good work and successes continue. That's about creating new mechanisms like all-party parliamentary groups, by creating cross-party advisors, work with civil society, seek out the experts, use networks like the PGA. And finally, I'm just going to close by saying thank you. As we have heard today by some of the most remarkable contributions, this is not an easy and not always a safe agenda to pursue. Our friend and great colleague and champion in Parliament, Jo Cox, was murdered exactly and specifically because she stood up for these values. And she did so much in her year or so in Parliament to push this agenda forward. It's not easy. Thank you, and thank you, panel. I'll stop.
Thank you so much, Dr. Ferguson. You used words like holistic and upstream and the global preventable phenomenon. I love all of these things. And also, thank you very much for giving a promotional shout out to the Stanley Foundation's policy memo. There are copies available still out on the table, and I think it can be a very useful document. So thank you very much for promoting that as well. Next up, we have Mr. Ali Ehsassi, a good friend who is a member of Parliament in Canada, chair of the all-party Parliamentary Group for the Prevention of Genocide and Mass Atrocity Crimes, and a member of the PGA. Ali, please.
Thank you, Keith. Good afternoon, everyone. It's a great honor to be here on this panel with such distinguished guests. I'd like to take a moment first to thank the organizers and supporters of this very worthy forum, the PGA, the Stanley Foundation, and the Montreal Institute for Genocide and Human Rights Studies, as well, of course, to thank the City of Milan, the Parliament of Italy, and the European Parliament. Now, as was noted, I'm a Canadian member of Parliament, but also honored to serve as the chair of the Canadian All-Party Parliamentary Group for the Prevention of Genocide and Other Crimes Against Humanity, which is also known as the GPG Group. It's one of only two parliamentary groups we have around the world. The GPG was first founded in 2006 by General Romeo Dallaire, who had distinguished himself as the commander of the UN peacekeeping forces in Rwanda. And he created this group to ensure that Canadian parliamentarians have the roots and the information to take action to prevent mass atrocities. The group also plays a fundamental role in linking the Canadian Parliament to bodies in civil society and other parliaments, allowing us all to work horizontally and collectively. Now, just to fast forward to what we're currently doing, currently we're conducting a study entitled Leveraging New Technologies to Prevent and Monitor Mass Atrocities, which examines how technological advances in tools like satellite imaging, GPS, and social media can help prevent and document cases of genocide and crimes against humanity. As smartphones have become ubiquitous, and as NGOs use humanitarian drones, and because everything is being tweeted, there have been corresponding effects on conflict. For the GPG study, we've heard from experts like Eyewitness, Benetech, the Sentinel Project, organizations including the Auschwitz Institute for Peace and Reconciliation and the Montreal Institute for Genocide and Human Rights Studies. We've also heard from academics and leaders in the field like Human Rights Watch and Minority Rights Group International. Although the lessons we've learned from this study are critical in determining how we can best use widely available technologies to prevent mass atrocities, we're also examining broader issues that can be applied in any context. I want to go through a number of key pieces of the puzzle in a parliamentarian's efforts to act on preventing mass atrocities. One of the most important pieces of the puzzle is an engaged civil society. It's rare that technology experts and policymakers come together for a discussion about how we can prevent mass atrocities. In order to effectively prevent genocide, we need more interlinkages between civil society experts and people who shape policy. A strong civil society is not only a good indicator of the political health of a country, it's also an invaluable asset to prevent mass atrocities. Very often, NGOs and grassroots organizations can act more quickly and closer to the ground than a state apparatus. I'll take an example from the GPG's current study to illustrate my point about the niche role of civil society organizations. The Sentinel Group, a Canadian NGO working hard to protect populations around the world who are vulnerable to mass atrocities. They informed us that their organization is active in investigating potentially dangerous rumors that exist between ethnic groups. It is not the role of the state, nor should it be, to make pronouncements on whether or not news is real or fake. That's where civil society organizations can step in to make a huge difference. Another critical piece of the puzzle for the success of a parliamentary group is aimed at preventing genocide is to work with external groups. The political priorities of parliament are government. No matter how hard a group works, if the government in power does not want to engage in efforts to prevent atrocities, progress will obviously be difficult. That's why I encourage any parliamentarian, or indeed any NGO trying to create change through a parliament, to look to how they can influence the priorities of a government on the issues of mass atrocity. Luckily for the Canadian Genocide Prevention Group, the Canadian government is deeply committed to combating mass atrocities around the world and aiding the most vulnerable. For starters, as many of you are well aware, since late 2015, we have resettled over 40,000 Syrian refugees. I'm also proud that the Canadian government welcomed 800 survivors of Daesh, including vulnerable Yazidi women and children, and will be resettling another 400. Our government has provided $25 million in humanitarian support to address the ongoing violence in Myanmar. And our Prime Minister recently actually appointed an envoy to go to Myanmar and inform him directly of developments on the ground. And most recently, a couple of weeks ago, the Prime Minister committed new peacekeeping capabilities at the Vancouver conference. Even though the Canadian Genocide Prevention Group operates in a positive political climate, that doesn't mean that challenges don't remain. From NGOs and scholars, we've been hearing about the importance of a national task force to provide a whole-of-government approach to atrocity prevention. Although Canada has many people working on the issue of atrocity prevention, we do not have one body that brings together the wide range of government agencies and departments needed to address genocide. In response, the Genocide Prevention Group has decided to take a study on the question of National Atrocity Prevention Task Force in the spring. It's absolutely vital to address both political and structural limitations that might hinder efforts by parliamentarians to respond to mass atrocities. I would certainly encourage every national government to establish a task force entirely dedicated to the goal of addressing mass atrocities. The other important resource for parliamentarians trying to make meaningful contributions is adequate funding for NGOs and other organizations. The Genocide Prevention Group has a long history of partnering with civil society organizations, foremost amongst those being the Montreal Institute for Genocide and Human Rights Studies. It is through interlinkages with these organizations, both in Canada and around the world, that we're able to have the biggest impact. But these organizations aren't able to provide expertise, reporting, analysis, and programs for free. They need funding to match their efforts. It's imperative that all states ensure that they provide enough funding to these groups working to prevent mass atrocities. The final piece of the puzzle is youth engagement. The drivers of mass atrocities don't just emerge all of a sudden. Very often, they are deeply ingrained fears and prejudices that have been built since childhood. The Genocide Prevention Group in Canada has been involved in a variety of projects aiming to build tolerance and awareness in youth. For a number of years, we have sponsored and partnered with local schools to host the Ottawa Youth Conference about building respect for diversity and inclusion. This year's topic is refugees, fleeing atrocities to build new lives in Canada, which could not be more timely. Supporting civil society, creating national task forces, providing funding, and engaging youth are critical, but they are large projects. I truly believe that even small actions by parliamentarians can have a very positive impact. So on April 23rd, we mark the National Day of Remembrance and Action on Mass Atrocities in Canada. I encourage all parliamentarians to have similar days which serve as focal points for efforts to address mass atrocities. I also encourage every parliament to set up an all-party parliamentary group that works for genocide prevention. Many small changes add up to meaningful results for people. Despite years of the international community's pledge of never again, genocide, crimes against humanity, and mass atrocities continue to be a tragic reality around the world. There has been an average of almost one case of genocide per year since 1945, according to some estimates. More than 80 million people have been killed by genocide, according to other estimates. As parliamentarians and as members of interparliamentary groups, it is our duty to do all that we can to prevent these tragedies and to bring justice for the victims of such mass atrocities. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Ehsassi, for sharing with us such pragmatic advice and the practical examples of what you've been able to do in Canada. We appreciate that. Next, we have Deputy Assata Touré from Mali, the chairwoman of the Foreign Affairs Committee, president of the Network of Malian Women Parliamentarians, and Madame Touré.
Merci, Président. Mesdames et Messieurs, honorables députés, chers parlementaires, distingués invités, permettez-moi d'abord d'adresser mes sincères remerciements aux instances de PGA, ainsi qu'aux autorités de la ville de Milan pour cette belle opportunité qui m'est offerte de parler de la situation de mon pays, le Mali. Depuis 2012, le Mali est confronté à une situation de crise très grave, caractérisée par, d'un côté, un coup d'État militaire, suivi heureusement d'une bonne transition et d'un retour à l'ordre constitutionnel, et d'un autre côté, par la montée en puissance des groupes de terroristes islamistes, surtout dans la zone saharienne du nord du Mali. C'est pendant cette période très dure pour le Mali, juste après les différentes élections présidentielles et législatives, que la communauté internationale a décidé un embargo sur les armes sous prétexte que l'armée procédait à une extermination de la minorité touareg au nord du Mali. Si la communauté internationale, comme les autorités nationales du pays, ont pu œuvrer pour la reprise normale de la vie constitutionnelle pour ce qui concerne le terrorisme, la situation reste toujours problématique. Il est devenu courant au Mali de compter chaque semaine des morts, soit dans les rangs de l'armée, soit dans les rangs de la mission onusienne. Il se dit d'ailleurs que la mission est celle qui compte le plus de pertes en vie humaine dans l'histoire des Nations Unies. Je ne veux pas rentrer dans les chiffres ici pour vous épargner les détails pénibles. En effet, malgré la présence des troupes des Nations Unies, communément appelées MINUSMA, malgré les efforts majeurs consentis par le gouvernement du Mali, l'extrémisme violent pratiqué par les groupes terroristes continue toujours à faire des ravages. Leur méthode reste imprévisible et dévastatrice. Dévastatrice par les amputations, les flagellations en public, les décapitations et l'embuscade avec des mines qui font sauter les véhicules aussi bien militaires que les véhicules civils. Le triste bilan des morts, comme je l'ai dit, au sein de la mission des Nations Unies est très lourd. La complexité du cas malien réside dans le fait que les groupes indépendantistes se sont fondus dans des groupes djihadistes extrémistes avec la présence de Moujao, de Boko Haram, AQMI et autres. Et plus récemment, un regroupement de plusieurs mouvements islamistes rendant extrêmement difficile les bonnes décisions et la prise des mesures appropriées dans un premier temps. Les groupes indépendantistes, renforcés par les mercenaires qui servaient en Libye sous Kadhafi, ont envahi le nord du Mali avec les armements de dernière génération à la chute de ces derniers. Ces mouvements indépendantistes se sont retrouvés sous la coupe des groupes islamistes et ils ont commencé à régner dans le nord du Mali où l'armée assistait impuissante, puisque étant sous embargo, au massacre des soldats. Cet extrémisme violent, aujourd'hui, est une nébuleuse qui ne se cantonne plus au seul nord du Mali, hélas. Le centre et le sud en souffrent. Tout aussi, comme certains pays voisins et frontaliers. Hier, j'ai parlé du Burkina, on a parlé du Niger, on a parlé de la Côte d'Ivoire même. Les causes de cette radicalisation sont multiples et variées, mais en tous les cas, l'endoctrinement religieux, l'appât du gain facile et surtout les trafics en tous genres, sans aucun contrôle, surtout dans la bande sahélo-saharienne, en sont des facteurs considérables. Il n'est évidemment pas du tout facile de lutter contre ce fléau à multiples facettes. Face à cette situation, l'Assemblée nationale du Mali a fait de fortes contributions pour la lutte contre cet état de fait, à travers d'abord l'adoption de la loi portant création de la commission Vérité, Justice et Réconciliation pour l'identification et en vue de l'indemnisation des victimes des atrocités. L'adoption de la loi d'orientation et de programmation militaire pour le renforcement logistique et la restructuration de l'armée, puisque l'armée était faible, elle avait besoin d'être renforcée. L'adoption de l'état d'urgence pour renforcer la sécurité et la protection civile et permettre aussi à ces différents services de prendre des dispositions proactives au sein de la population. C'est-à-dire permettre à des moments qui allaient au-delà des heures normales autorisées de faire des enquêtes au sein de la population. Il y a également l'adoption de la loi portant création de la force G5 Sahel pour les pays frontaliers qui souffrent du même fléau. Nous avons également la création des réseaux de parlementaires pour la défense des droits humains. À chaque fois que nous avons des problèmes concernant, comme ils ont dit, des communautés stigmatisées, quand nous sommes saisis au niveau de l'Assemblée nationale, nous nous déplaçons pour aller faire des écoutes, des enquêtes pour voir sur le terrain ce qui se passe exactement. Et enfin, il y a les séances de sensibilisation à la base avec les plaidoyers et les lobbying lors des forums internationaux. Mais nous n'avons pas exactement, en tant que tel, une loi contre le terrorisme. L'Assemblée nationale travaille avec les services techniques à ce jour, là où nous sommes en train de réfléchir à cette idée pour pouvoir avoir une loi dans ce sens. Pour ce qui concerne les mesures politiques, le gouvernement du Mali a marqué sa ferme volonté et son engagement en prenant certaines mesures, parmi lesquelles la création du ministère de la Réforme de l'État et des droits de l'homme, qui met l'accent sur la lutte contre les exactions. La création des ministères du culte et des affaires religieuses, qui permet d'encadrer la religion pour éviter éventuellement les débordements. La création du ministère de la Réconciliation nationale pour apaiser le climat social. Et aujourd'hui, nous remarquons des résultats notables par la prise de ces dispositions et leur mise en œuvre effective. L'implication des populations dans la mise en œuvre des dispositions prises par la fourniture d'informations appropriées, les dénonciations des situations ambiguës et la participation active de la population elle-même à la préservation de sa propre sécurité font que les choses commencent à bouger maintenant. La formation des imams pour prêcher l'islam que le Mali a toujours pratiqué aide aussi beaucoup à la lutte. La liberté religieuse existe au Mali, malgré ces violences. En guise d'illustration, le Mali vient d'avoir son premier cardinal à la personne de Jean Zerbo. Pour ce qui concerne des initiatives prises afin de mettre fin à l'impunité pour les atrocités de masse, le gouvernement, à travers ses services techniques, fait le travail judiciaire conventionnel, surtout par les interpellations, les investigations, les condamnations, mais avec une proactivité importante et également une forte collaboration avec la CPI. D'ailleurs, le mois dernier, les 17 et 18 octobre, la procureure Mme Fatou Bensouda était au Mali pour justement coordonner les actions entre le gouvernement du Mali et la CPI. Évidemment, tout ce travail se fait dans la complémentarité. Il n'est pas question qu'on nous impose des mesures que nous ne pouvons pas faire. Ce que nous pouvons faire au Mali, nous le faisons, et ce qui va au-delà un peu des compétences du pays sera transmis au niveau de la CPI. Mesdames et messieurs, l'impact de toutes ces actions, que ce soit la sensibilisation, les mesures restrictives, ne peut être mesuré dans l'immédiat. C'est une lutte de longue haleine. Ce n'est pas du jour au lendemain qu'on peut se lever pour dire on va clarifier la situation, on va arrêter le processus. Puisque nous savons comment, avec les nouvelles technologies de l'information, il est possible de faire des recrutements, même en dehors de l'espace occupé. Pardon. Des gens qui sont en dehors du Mali peuvent recruter et puis envoyer les gens au niveau du Mali sans qu'on voit même les traces de façon physique. Il est possible de faire des recrutements, comme je l'ai dit, de façon invisible. Des actions concertées et mutualisées doivent être renforcées pour véritablement voir une amélioration de la situation. Pardon. À l'état actuel des choses, le Mali seul ne peut pas faire le travail. C'est pourquoi nous avons approuvé au niveau de l'Assemblée nationale la création de la force G5. Mais nous restons à cet effet ouverts à tout appui et à toute suggestion pour nous aider à mieux travailler, pour jouer pleinement notre rôle dans la lutte contre l'extrémisme violent et les atrocités de masse. Je m'en arrête là et me tiens à votre disposition pour des informations complémentaires. Je vous remercie de votre aimable attention.
Thank you, Madam Toure, again, for sharing such interesting information about what's happening in your country and the practical steps that you are taking and those that still need to be taken. Finally, on our panel, we have the Honorable M. Kula, Member of Parliament from Malaysia, Vice Chair of the Opposition, Deputy Convener of the PGA's International Law and Human Rights Program, and Secretary of the PGA Malaysia National Group. Honorable Kula, please.
Thank you, Mr. Jai. Honorable panelists, honorable members of Parliament, Your Excellencies, a very good evening. Extremism and mass atrocities, you will not disagree, it is one of the most relevant and important topics that has to be addressed. If not now, when should this be addressed? It affects almost anyone in this world. When we are going to fly or coming in, we hope there's no terrorism in the airports, in our cities and elsewhere. But somehow this extremism and violent atrocities has been increasing over the time. And why it has been increasing is because many governments in this world are just firefighting the issue and thinking that a temporary address on these issues will solve the matter. In my country, we have a moderate Muslim country, a majority Muslim population. In the last 3-4 years, there's been terrorism activities have increased. And in fact, a few hundreds of them are fighting the war in Syria. And many have been killed. And the government recognizes that. But still, what we don't have is a long-term plan to address this. What has been done is, as I said, is firefighting. Just an issue, take it up. If you know any terrorists or if they locate any terrorists, take necessary action, and that's it. But I think what is far more important is the religious extremism is slowly creeping in. And this has to be looked into. And in Malaysia, although we have a Muslim majority, we have non-Muslims who form nearly 40% of the population. What they are asking, the minorities, is interfaith dialogues. Even then, we can't even get that done because there are some people in the majority who feel that these are matters that cannot be discussed openly, that cannot be discussed, and therefore it cannot be addressed. These are the issues that are affecting each and every citizen in my country. One of the easiest ways any government in this world will do is to pass the necessary laws. Laws to contain extreme activity, terrorism, and all that. It's very interesting. In Malaysia, we have the Terrorism Act, we have the Crime Prevention Act, we have the Special Security Act. But just before that, about 40 years ago, we had similar acts known as the Internal Security Act, which was actually more or less mirror of these acts. It was meant to address the communist insurgency in my country. Primarily, the act was for that. But unfortunately, many of those who suffered in the jail, detention without trial, were not the communists. They were ordinary politicians, people like me and people like my party leader, who has been in jail under the old act for nearly 7 years. Even the present opposition leader, he's been caught and kept in jail. Now, these are the misuse that take place. Now, coming back to terrorism, in my region, unfortunately, is one of the most unstable areas. Not in Malaysia. Malaysia is relatively okay. In the southern Philippines and in the south of Thailand, it's very restrictive. It is not safe to go there. Hundreds have been killed. Bombs go off very frequently. And the governments of this country, nothing much actually can be done. Why? They're still doing the old system of firefighting. This is where is my opinion that there are 5 or 6 ways that what has to be done to address this issue. One will be, there must be a vision of social justice. Number 2, it will be to address with local governments. Number 3, create solidarity movements with peasants, farmers, and others. And number 4, to have inter-religious dialogue. And number 5, and I think is the most important, is the empowering of women. Parliamentarians, number 1, parliamentarians should have a vision of social justice in their respective society. They need to serve the common good where the people's interest as a whole should be the basis of its struggle. This entails fighting inequality in society. Democracy should be linked to social justice as a whole and not merely about elections or abstract ideas about the separation of powers. Number 2, parliamentarians should support the principle of subsidiary, where local governments are empowered to look for solutions in their community instead of depending on central or state governments. When local communities are integrated and empowered, there will be less sense of alienation that could prevent the young from being radicalized. Why I say local governments? In my country, for the last 50 years, there's been no elections for local government. It was abolished in 1966, and it has been there like that since then. The local government only works by way of appointment, which is the most important, which is the nearest to the society, nearest to the people. And number 3, parliamentarians should create solidarity movements with peasants, farmers, fishermen, and factory workers to better their livelihood and challenge economic systems that favor big corporations. Number 4, there should be support of inter-religious dialogue. And to us, this is very, very important. Inter-religious dialogue in the community level, where there is interfaith dialogue, the good values of other religions could be appreciated, and that would prevent the sense of superiority and extremism. Why I say so? There are extremists who would not prefer violence. Many may not realize this, but would take a part in imposing its beliefs on others or propagate public segregations in the name of religion that has the element of control. In Malaysia, we have extremists who do not resort to violence, but tend to suggest its ideological religious orientation in a multi-ethnic and religious society. Violence could be the end result in this context if there is substantive opposition to either religious authorization among the people. What can we do? My view, there are 3 ways to address it. Military solution, profiling terrorists or freezing assets. Terrorists alone will not resolve the root cause of violent extremism. It has to be concerted effort of parliamentarian, global parliamentarians to work towards fighting inequality in the domestic and international affairs. The approach of social justice should start from the community, national and global level. Religion should be a vehicle of understanding civilizations and social justice, which could help reduce the sense of religious or ethnic superiority. And this could lead towards social solidarity in opposing all forms of injustice, whether in politics, economy, or the environment. Finally, my dream. My dream is to eliminate all extremism and mass atrocities in this world. Do you agree with me? Yeah. Yes. That should be our dream. And how do we achieve it? The only way we can achieve it is if the communities, parliamentarians, governments act on it. If not, what will happen? Those days, if you go back 40, 50 years, the fight was between communism and democracy, correct? Now is terrorism against democracy. If you want democracy to prevail, if you want to share the same dream as many of us in this world have, let's finish terrorism and mass atrocities, what come may. Thank you.
Thank you, Honorable M. Kula, for sharing your dream and for giving us a pragmatic roadmap for how we move from firefighting, as you said, to true prevention and elimination. Thank you very much for that. I do want to clarify one thing. Dr. Ferguson mentioned a policy memo. We have a policy memo from the Stanley Foundation out on the tables, and it includes advice for legislators. Dr. Ferguson was referring to a document that we just released earlier this month. And you can find it on our website. It's called Taking Stock of the Evidence, What Works to Reduce Violence and Prevent Atrocities. And I want to repeat the numbers that Dr. Ferguson mentioned, first because they're very important, and second because I want to make sure we give the proper attribution. A new report from the Institute for Economics and Peace found that violence containment costs the global economy $14.3 trillion per year. $14.3 trillion. Yet a 2016 analysis by Mercy Corps and the Search for Common Ground of annual overseas development assistance spending, as defined by the OECD, found that governments spend just 1% of ODA on conflict mitigation and peace building, and only 8% of ODA on politics, security, justice, and the rule of law. We can do better. All right, we have time now for some interventions, and I think first up we have the Honorable Adnan Kenyon. Yes, down there. Oh. Yes, we have very limited time. We have about 10 minutes before we need to move on to debating the final document.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My name is Adan Kainan, Honorable Adan Kainan from Kenya. I want to join other colleagues actually in congratulating the conveners of this meeting for a job well done, and I hope the same will continue. Having said that, the issue of violent extremism and mass atrocities is something that has been really disturbing. Almost not only parliamentarians, but everybody actually who lives in this civilized world. And therefore, what comes to my mind is, who is an extremist? Is it a religious fanatic? Is it a cultural fanatic? Is it a political fanatic? Is it an economic saboteur? Why is it that this global problem has faced a serious definitional problem? Why didn't we get one definition for this international menace? Is a question I'm posing to everybody. Secondly, what contributes to this violent extremist? Is it because of multilateralism? Is it because of multiculturalism? Is it because of globalization? Is it because of unfairness and injustice? What really contributes to this? Are there solutions? My friend from Malaysia has just alluded to one thing, an interfaith-based narrative. Can it be the solution? Can categorization and collective punishment of people of certain faith really bring this to an end? The answer may be no. Can the prescription of a particular democratic ideals bring this menace to an end? In the Kenyan context, as most of you are aware, since 1998, Kenya has been on the receiving end of this extremist. In 1998, the US Embassy in Nairobi was bombed. The US Embassy in Tanzania was also bombed. And since then, hundreds of Kenyans or East Africans or other visitors have either been maimed or killed because of the activities of these mad people. And therefore, as a parliament, as a Kenyan parliament, we have decided to put a number of measures just to avoid any extrajudicial handling of this particular menace or any extra legal or extra constitutional means, because sometimes when you give the security forces actually a free hand to deal with this menace, there are attempts actually also to also engage in other things that may not be proper actually within the law. And therefore, what we have done since 1998, we have enacted the Prevention of Terrorism Act. We have also enacted the Prevention of Organized Crime Act. We have also enacted the Proceeds of Crime and Anti-Money Laundering Act. We have established National Center for Terrorism Center, a multi-agency instrument that primarily brings together almost all security agencies. We have introduced a curriculum within our education system called the new national strategy targeting the youth actually since 2014. We have also offered amnesty to all those who are involved in this. Just like maybe many of you are aware, in 2010, we adopted one of the most transformative and reformist constitution actually in Africa. That again has not given us any solution. So what we are trying to do right now, and Kenya being a member of a responsible member actually in the international community, we have 3 of the biggest refugee camps actually in the world. Hagarder, Dadaab, Ifo. Because Somalia, which has been plunged into a civil war in 1991, has still remained in a very serious political, social, and economic upheaval. And as a neighbor, we are duty-bound and as a responsible member of the international community to allow some of the victims, the women, the children, and the elderly people actually to come and live in Kenya as refugees.
Please.
And therefore, what do we need to do as people's representative actually in a civilized world? I think there is need right now to come up with a concerted and coordinated international effort in dealing with these menace without really apportioning blame to any particular religion or group or region, and deal with it fairly, objectively, and conclusively. Because at times, there has been tendency actually to collectively, sometimes there has been a feeling, but whether though perceptual, that certain religion, when you talk of Muslim or Islamic faith, then that is not synonymous with terrorists. Because just like what happened in Egypt, those who are the victims actually most of them actually are Muslims.
Yes.
Those who have alleged to have committed these are also alleged to be Muslims. And therefore, it's not something that we can say Muslim terrorists or Islamic terrorists. I think that definition is wrong. So what we need to do, because they are mad people, and I don't think whether they can qualify to belong to any faith, because faith is normally supposed to be driven by love and fear of God. And therefore, anybody who just blindly goes to the field and kills innocent people actually cannot be said to be belonging to any faith.
Thank you.
And they are faithless. Actually, we should say this.
Thank you.
And therefore, my conclusion is, can the world come up with people-friendly approach in dealing with these menace? Because as my friend from Malaysia has rightly put it, 2 decades ago, we used to talk of competition between capitalism and communism. Right now, we are talking about this ideological confusion. Can we sit down in particular through a scholarly approach and deal with this menace? Thank you.
All right, thank you. Yes. I have room maybe for one more intervention. I have Deputy Laurent Ngon Baba from Central African Republic.
Merci, Monsieur le Président des séances. Je voulais très sincèrement remercier d'abord le PGA pour l'occasion qu'il nous a donnée pour échanger sur cette question du terrorisme violent et des atrocités. Je me rends compte de la pertinence du sujet parce que c'est un fléau aujourd'hui dans le monde. Et je me félicite personnellement pour avoir répondu à cette invitation, participer à cette séance. Je voulais saisir l'occasion de poser la question au sous-secrétaire général des Nations Unies, qui reconnaît effectivement que le cadre juridique existe bel et bien, le cadre juridique est solide, mais c'est l'application des dispositions contre le terrorisme violent, les atrocités qui posent problème. Et Monsieur le secrétaire général des Nations Unies, vous savez, votre collaborateur qui s'occupe de génocide est passé à Bangui, en Centrafrique, et à un comité de prévention, de lutte contre le génocide et des atrocités a été mis en place. Or, quand on parle de terrorisme violent, pour répondre à ces fléaux, il faut une justice forte, il faut appliquer les textes. Il se trouve que lorsque vous avez des terroristes, mais pour les juger, il faut d'abord les arrêter. Il faut d'abord les arrêter. Et vous connaissez bien, dans le contexte du terrorisme violent et des atrocités, il est extrêmement difficile. D'abord, l'État perd généralement sa capacité de police judiciaire. Dans ces cas-là, comment il faut faire? C'est vrai, vous avez aidé les Nations Unies à travers MINUSCA Aide la puissance centrafricaine pour mettre à la disposition de la Cour pénale spéciale une police judiciaire renforcée. Ça ne couvre pas le territoire. Alors, dans ces cas, qu'est-ce qu'il faut faire sans arrêter l'auteur du terrorisme? Est-ce que la justice peut s'appliquer? Première question. Deuxième question, si le terroriste est à l'extérieur, or, nous avons des conventions d'extradition qui sont rares. Est-ce qu'il n'y a pas lieu que le Parlement développe, encourage le gouvernement pour développer les accords judiciaires d'extradition des terroristes afin qu'ils répondent de leurs actes? Je vous remercie.
Thank you very much. Excellent question. I will give Honorable M. Kula 1 minute, and then I will give Mr. Simonovic 1 minute, and we will be done. M. Kula.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The honourable member has posed three issues. Who are the extremists? Why they contribute to extremism? Can interfaith and the issue of extremism? Honestly, I was wondering how to answer. But you have helped me in giving the answer. The answer is, you yourself have suggested it, people-friendly policies. So that's my dream. The people-friendly policies will solve all this headache.
Thank you. We do have legal framework, we do have political will, we do not have sufficient political will. We do have frameworks. And I think that governments have accepted certain obligations and have to be reminded. On national level, you are ideally positioned to remind them of their obligations. Unfortunately, we also have divisions in the Security Council deeper than ever after the Cold War. I do also believe that in future it will make sense to push to have open meetings of the Security Council, at least on a yearly basis, analysis, role of Security Council, its action and inaction in atrocity prevention. Thank you.
Thank you all very much. Let's give a round of applause to our panelists.